Hello everyone. I wanted to take a minute and talk about the Mann Gulch disaster article by Weick in relation to our current situation with the corona pandemic. I don't know why Weick would be watching this, but if you are and I totally butcher your article, I'm sorry. I'm a huge fan. I like the work you do. I've used for the Teams class I teach, the entrepreneur leadership class, you would have read this, for the organizational behavior class. This is one of my staples. I've used this Weick article a long time in the Teams lectures. I think the reason I've always used it in the Teams lectures, think about a team as a small organization. And I use it to talk about the 4 elements that would make a team more resilient that Weick outlines in the article. So these are bricolage, virtual role systems, attitude of wisdom, and then what I would call respectful interactions. Okay, I think that he uses a different terminology. When teams are able to focus on these, they become more resilient in chaotic situations. I have taught this article ever since I first read it. I've always used it in class because I think it's a great article. I've always had a problem with trying to demonstrate to students what a cosmology episode is. So remember from the article, cosmology episode, the opposite of deja vu, whenever we have this experience that is so unlike anything that we've experienced before, that it results in panic. But the idea is that just everything seems different. The example I've always used in class is, if you've ever gone to a foreign country where you don't speak the language, you probably had a little bit of a cosmology episode when you first stepped off that plane, because everything is different. The language is different, the signs are written different, you don't understand. You know you're in an airport, but besides that, the navigation becomes a little more difficult. I'm sure many of you experienced a cosmology episode in the last few weeks. I did, I can tell you that. I left on Friday before spring break, expected to return a week later to what was normal, and that's not occurring. So I think though, if we look at those 4 elements that Weick is talking about, it really gives us some ideas about what's going on in this situation, and I just wanted to talk to you about how I see this stuff playing out. So the first element, bricolage. Remember, we have cosmology episodes, and what happens in cosmology episodes is we panic. And the reality of panic is what oftentimes happens is we resort to the strategy that has always worked because we're just reacting. And that strategy that has always worked is sort of our default, but by the very nature of the situation, that strategy will not work because we're having a cosmology episode in panic because the situation has changed. Our example, we have this pandemic breakout. We cannot have class anymore. The situation has changed so drastically, that's why I'm having a cosmology episode. I can't make heads or tails. The way I run my classes, as you guys know, is face-to-face interaction. I don't use Blackboard. I don't use PowerPoint. I get up there, I lecture for an hour and a half if you're an OB. If you're in the entrepreneur leadership class, I sit there, I have discussions with you, I give you some lecture on the board. The strategy that I've used is not working. That's why I'm having a cosmology episode, because the environment has changed, the situation has changed. So what would be my default response? Normally, if something changes, what I do is I wait until Tuesday when I see you all, and I say, okay, you guys are here, let me talk to you about what's going on. That right there will not work, right? I can't do that. Bricolage, bricolage, bricolage. Remember what we do in bricolage is we say, here's where I wanted to go. Here was my plan that I wanted to use. Well, elements of that plan are no longer there. So how do I take the resources that I have at hand, that I have with me right now, to try to execute that plan so that I still can reach that goal? In my situation, I like to lecture. What resource do I have? I have the internet. The other resource I have is I have things like Blackboard, but like I said, I don't use it. I really don't know how to use it. So I'd have to learn to use that, so that I'd use up other resources, which is time, which is an essential resource reacting in this situation. The other resource I have though, is I have a little bit of knowledge about YouTube. So what I do to adapt in this situation is I say, I want to still do face-to-face lectures, still have the internet, I know how to use this platform, here's how I'm going to do that. That's bricolage in action. We can argue whether that's a successful strategy or that's a good strategy or if I should have used a different strategy, but that right there of saying, here's what I wanted to accomplish, certain elements have changed, what are the resources that I do have at hand that I can best execute that strategy? Second thing, virtual role systems. The virtual role systems is this idea that I have a mental picture of all the various roles that have to be played in this team or this organization. And I know who is playing each of those roles. And most importantly, there's an understanding among all the team members or the members of the organization that if somebody is not able to fill their role in a critical moment, that role still has to be filled. And somebody, maybe me, has to step up and fill that role. What I said in class is there's a whole back end to this. Once we get out of the chaos, we don't let that person off the hook that vacated their role. We figure out why and figure out what we need to do in the future so that doesn't happen. But in the moment of chaos, somebody has to step up and fill that role. Perfect example of what's going on right now in our organization at the university. We have to move very quickly from face-to-face to online. And there's a whole range and comfortableness with professors about, yeah, I can do online, to I'm not comfortable with technology. The teaching role still needs to be executed. And yeah, there are people assigned to those roles, but if somebody is not doing that, and it doesn't matter what the reason is in this moment right now, we'll have a discussion in a couple months about why they weren't able to do it. But in this moment right now, coming back to school in a week, we need to figure something out, and somebody that is not able to fill their role, somebody else has to step up and fill it, if you want to be resilient and survive this situation. Number 3 that Weick talks about to make a team more resilient or a small organization more resilient is the attitude of wisdom. The attitude of wisdom, think about this. We adapted our strategies. I have a platform right now that is going to work and get us through the semester. But the attitude of wisdom is looking forward and saying, okay, we have an accurate mental model right now. What happens if the situation changes again? How do we need to start proactively planning and thinking about potential changes in our strategy? So one of the things, and again, this is the attitude of wisdom in actions, one of the things I'm thinking about right now, as other people are, what do I do for my class if, quite frankly, and I think it's going to be inevitable, we have internet problems. Okay, I don't think the internet's going to crash completely, but the idea that, hey, we're all going to have synchronized classes, there's a system that can get overloaded. There's an internet that can get overloaded. How am I going to deliver this content and adapt if all of a sudden that environmental situation changes? So that's the attitude of wisdom, proactively thinking how we could adapt in the future for future potential changes. And then the last thing is the respectful interactions. And what I told you guys in class was the respectful interactions really is the same as trying to overcome the paradox of mutually inclusive reality. The paradox of mutually inclusive reality, again, is the idea that we're all living in our own world. Even though we're experiencing things simultaneously and mutually, we all have our own individual filters in our mind. Perceptions just vary. So what Weick talks about is we need to have trust and honesty. The way I view it is that what he's saying essentially is that I need to share my reality with the people as honestly as I can. I'm not trying to be manipulative when I'm telling them my reality, and I need to trust that they're doing the same with me. In this situation, I think we can see this quite a bit. It would be things like, okay, this is a trusted expert that's on my team. When they tell me something, I need to trust that that is their perception of reality. They don't have this alternative agenda of doing X, Y, and Z. Also, Weick talks about, not that I'm going to abandon what I think completely, but I'm going to take what the other person is saying as that's their perception of reality. So I don't know if that was helpful at all, but I just thought that this situation was unique in that we're all kind of experiencing a cosmology episode. We're seeing some bricolage in action. I think if you look at some of the companies that are surviving, you see some of the virtual role systems, and companies that I believe are being proactive right now are taking that attitude of wisdom.